Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Marius Franklin, an APEL board member and facilitator of the call today. Thank you for joining this workshop, Managing the Changing Needs of Your Center's Consumers and Staff while keeping your consumers safe. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I just want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen. This is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the closed captioning tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen, if slides are shown, you can select the line in the middle to make the slides larger or smaller. First, today we will have some Spanish today. So for Spanish interpreting, find the globe icon on the menu bar. Please select the interpretation button. You can then select Spanish. If you only want to hear Spanish, select on mute original audio. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in that same menu bar. If you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt-H, or please use the info and help section on the conference website for more help. For Q&A times, please note the Q&A box is on the menu bar. Please only submit questions there as they may get lost in the chat. To ask a question or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar. That allows us to know if you have a question. For those of you on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute. You can select the unmute option or Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. Thank you. And just to introduce your presenter today, we have Paula McElwee. Hope I said that right. Alex Maluxy. And then we have Vicki Smith. So I hope you guys enjoy the presentation.
All right, well, thank you so much. I haven't yet been able to share my screen, just if you would enable me, please, for that. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I look like. This is Paula McElwee, and I'm a 70-year-old silver-haired woman of Scottish ancestry, so mostly rosy pink skin. And I have a blue shirt on and some turquoise jewelry. And Alex, would you like to describe yourself?
Sure. My name is Alex Mikowski. I'm a white woman who recently turned 40, wearing a blue, gray, and black shirt. I have red glasses. I got some blue streaks in my hair. And I'm a person of descent from all over Europe. So I'm a white woman who uses she, her pronouns.
Okay, and Vicki? Unmute, please. There you go.
I'm Vicki Smith, and I'm not sure that unmuting makes you better able to hear me, but I have a really bad cold.
You froze, Vicki. So I don't know if you want to turn off your screen or your camera. Well, Vicki turned off her camera, but we also lost her sound. So I'm not sure how Vicki would describe herself, but she's got short silver hair like mine. So Vicki, do you want to add anything?
I stopped sharing Vicky's screen, hoping that would help. Vicky has her internet is a little bit iffy right now. So if she goes in and out, we'll just kind of pick up the slack for her.
Sounds like a plan. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and share the screen then and go from there. I hope I've got the right screen. Let's see if it does the right thing. Does that look like a screen?
Yes.
All right. From the beginning. So we've already given you our name and our title, which we know is kind of long, but we struggled with leaving anything out because we're all seeing change, right? Some of it's post-COVID change, some of it's maybe just times we live in, but a lot of people are saying to us that they're finding that they're serving consumers who have negative reputations in the community, and that's happening more and more. And so they want to know how to keep everybody safe, the consumers, because they are more at risk than others have been in the past, as well as the staff. A little about each of us. I'm from ILRU. I have been an executive director of a center, but now I'm assisting others who are executive directors of centers, and both Alex and Vicki are executive directors of centers in New York and in North Carolina, respectively. Our goals for this session are to create a center environment where staff and consumers can reduce their anxiety, because anxiety is one of the realities that we're seeing, right? That a lot of us have struggled a bit with. So that's just a reality for all of us, I think. To maintain a safe environment if you're working in homes or out in the community, because a lot of us, especially in areas that don't have reliable transportation, end up going to the consumers because the consumers have a lot of difficulty coming to us. And so some of our services are home-based, which puts us at a little different kind of risk, but also increases our risk a little bit. And to anticipate risks without being judgmental or acting too soon, because that's a little bit of a balancing act and takes some attention to the situation. Some strategies to apply for hearing and assisting with angry individuals, and how to hear their concerns and assist them with those concerns. To respond to those at risk of self-harm or suicide. And when do we ask for someone else to come and help? Often that's law enforcement. So if you look at your policies, you may have a policy that describes that, but that's an important one. So is the office a safe place? Do you do anything in your office to make it safer? Sometimes that's the front desk or reception. Sometimes that's how open the area is, which can be either positive or negative. Does somebody have a way to let the rest of the office know there's a risk without making things worse? Do you use a panic button? Do you call 911? We'll talk about whether you call them or not in a little bit and how that might work. Any feedback, Alex or Vicki, on any of those, how to make the office a safe place?
Yeah, so this is Alex here. I think it's a trade-off of making sure people feel comfortable and it's not oppressive, or you feel like you're walking into a government building with all kinds of screens and things. I know for us, one of our priorities was to make sure there were multiple exits. Unfortunately, only one of them has a push button to actually leave. So that's a challenge. Panic buttons are good. Don't put them where your knees might be. I've set them off multiple times in my career. And one thing that's awesome that we have is we have a intercom system here, so I can pick up the phone and say, hey, everybody, we're, like pizza's here or whatever. So we can try to get everyone's attention without saying we have an angry client out loud.
So a code phrase or word that lets people know without making the person who's angry any angrier. Yeah, that has
Yeah.
some advantages. Yeah. Locking the front door isn't always effective. I once visited a place that had a situation where they had a locking front door. And fortunately, while there were some people hurt, nobody was killed in this incident, but a person had a gun, and it was somebody known to the receptionist. And so when he said, let me in, she did, thinking she was giving him safety. And instead she was letting him into the rest of the building. And so you can't always know, locking the door isn't always a solution. It may be a partial solution. And I know a lot of people set up, a little bit of barrier between the receptionist and the guests with COVID as a germ barrier, not as a barrier for people necessarily, but just as a safety precaution. But so that may be something that some of you have done to make the situation a little more, just a little more distant, a little step back a minute, kind of thing. Yeah, and I don't know if Vicki wanted to add anything there.
Oh, it looks like she put something in the chat. So she said, we provide most of our services in the community, including in consumers' homes. So we rarely have people in our office.
And Jackie's asked about remaining safe while in a home, and we're going to spend quite a bit of the presentation on that topic for sure. So part of what we want to do too is prepare an environment that is an environment of acceptance and listening. And if the entryway seems like a fort, does that impede the ability of people to have an environment of acceptance? How do you do it, an environment of acceptance? What works for you, Alex?
Yeah, so for us that it feels welcoming, that we greet everyone that comes in. We try to put down any kind of negative emotion, or like the last crisis when the next person comes in the door or calls on the phone, to give people time and just to check in with them. So our receptionist does a good job of like, hey, how's it going? So what's your name? What do you need? What's going on? And so he gets all the required things, but also sets it up that this is a place where you can not be okay, and that's okay.
Yeah. And to be warm without, being too much in the face of people is always a positive thing. Well, Alex, you're going to talk quite a bit about going out into the community. So let's go to the slides that are mostly yours for a while.
Sure. Yeah. So I first just want to shout out, this is my first time doing a presentation where it's translated into Spanish. So hello, my Spanish speaking friends. En poco español, so I'm glad you have an actual translator. So when you're thinking about going out to the community, it's really helpful to check the file, especially if they're a known person, to understand any of the history that might impact the situation. So we're currently on slide 7 for those of you following along at home. So things like history of violence or threats, history of substance misuse or problematic use, mental health history, and family violence history. Just because someone has these stressors in the past or this past threat or violence doesn't necessarily mean that you're in danger yourself, because maybe they were mad when their children got taken away, when their disability kind of got out of their control. But in your current role, you have nothing to do with foster care or taking things away, or maybe their kids are all grown up, so the CPS or child protective isn't even a factor in their life right now. Also, what are their current stressors? So we had someone last month, we had this lovely retired couple that are normally the nicest people ever, but they found themselves homeless and in a tight bind. And so they got angry at the situation, which then could have turned to anger to us. Next slide, please.
Ryan.
So before you leave, try to look up the address. So have you been to the neighborhood before? Do you have cell phone service? Because in like at least a third of my county, there's no cell phone service at all. So it's important to know where those lines are, so then you know where you can go to call for help or when you need to make a firmer plan, because there's no a cell phone service to ask for help. Construction is everywhere near me right now. I'm not sure if it's by you as well. But looking through construction or any concerns about how are you going to physically get to your place. Also thinking about where to park. In many rural places, you can only park on the side of the road or at the end of a driveway. It's good to not be blocked in if at all possible. To know what's going on in the street. I grew up most of my life in a rural place where people flew by my house at 60 or 70. So parking on the side of the road, then getting out of the car is going to be dangerous. And are you wearing the correct shoes? I've gone to many farms where it's much better to not be wearing professional shoes, even though that's what the policy was, because I was going into a farm. And so I had those conversations with supervisors to make sure I was safe and comfortable. It's also good to consider potentially easy off shoes or shoe covers. Vicki is chiming in as well in the chat that staff make the call about their own feelings of safety. And when they're uncomfortable, we talk with them about strategies to leave. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to go a little more into that. Next slide, please. So now we're on slide 9. So there's 2 images on your screen. They're both a picture of a little rural village. One's more zoomed out, one's more zoomed in. So in the more zoomed out one, you can see that there's a soccer field, there's an elementary school, and there's several intersections. And there's a red circle that indicates where the house is that we're going to go visit. So in the next picture that's zoomed in, you can see the intersection. The house that we want to visit is right next to the long driveway to the school, and there's a 3-way stop sign. So where would you park and what challenges might you guys expect?
Feel free to drop a response in the chat. Where would you park if you're looking at this? And as she described, there's an elementary school right there. It's looks like a pretty main street.
So let's see, we have a couple. Challenge could be with school and traffic. Yes, I've tried to do visits that people are very nervous about people seeing that there's someone there, and then all the school buses are driving out. So knowing what time does this elementary school let out, or when do parents start coming to pick up their people? Oh, can you park at the elementary school? Great question. And somebody else says I would park on West Academy. On the right of the freeway stop. Yep.
Yeah, that looks like a good place to park, assuming that there's not restrictions related to the school zone. And that's something that's hard to see from the Google printout.
Yes.
Do you think you could give a quick visual description of the map? I think that might help people figure out where they might be able to park, just in case they can't see the image.
Sure. So So of the zoomed in section, there's a street called West Academy. That comes down from the, now I'm using my directions, which is hard for me. So coming down the left side of the picture, and then it curves at a 90-degree angle. And then about halfway over, there's a driveway to an elementary school. And the house that we want to visit is right on the other side of the driveway.
Mary said I might try to drive by the day or two beforehand to make some plans about where to park and what might be going on at any particular time of day. And if it's in your regular pathway, that's a good thing to do. Sometimes you are going some distance from your office or home to get there, and so you might not be able to do that, but when you can, that's a great idea.
Yes, I also frequently do a drive-by path of kind of like, so I plan to get there, 15, 20 minutes early when I can, and I do a loop of the neighborhood. And so that can kind of give you a sense of what to do before it's actually time to pull in. That's harder if you have a vehicle that has the name of your agency on the side, because then people will notice and say, why were you circling the neighborhood? That's a separate issue. All right, let's go to the next slide. So checklist before you leave. So we're on slide 10 now. Do people know where you're going? I used to joke that when I worked for the county, no one would know I did not come back from my visit until they went to get the agency car the next day and the car keys weren't there. So it's really important that you have a way that you communicate. For us, we have a shared calendar that myself and our admin assistant have access to. So we know where was the last person that person, like, sorry, where was the last place that person was at. It's also, if that's not an option, to send a message or communicate with someone else that they know where you're going, what's the phone number there, and what's the client name. Communicate how long the visit might be. So I've gone to some situations that were like a little uneasy. So I made sure that my supervisor knew exactly how long I was planning for the visit to be. I knew I had to be there for at least 30 minutes to bill. So I figured, within 40 minutes, I'm going to be out of there. If I don't communicate within an hour and a half, they're going to start making plans to try to figure out what happened to me. And what's the best time of day? I always try to avoid dark home visits if possible. I was a part of programs where if you got the crisis call at 11 p.m. or 6 a.m., you went. That's not my preference at all. The only time I fell on a home visit was leaving a house I'd gone to probably 100 times, but I was leaving the house at dark, so tripped over a flower bed. I suggest to bring the paperwork that you need, but don't bring anything fancy. Don't get your newest bag that you just got from someone. And don't bring any other PHI or protected health information. I had a coworker that had a notebook with all of their folks in it, and they left that notebook behind. So not only is that a HIPAA violation, but that also can destroy their trust in your agency. And do you have pockets? I'm a woman and I love pockets because most of my clothes do not have them. So I normally, when I go out, I have a jacket that I can put in my notebook and my keys and my pens and extra paperwork. So I don't have to set things down. And I can't leave anything behind that way.
And I just wanted to mention,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
you said shake hands, and I know we haven't been shaking hands a lot with COVID, and it's going to be curious to see how that changes long term.
Yeah, I try to match whatever the person is doing.
Right.
So if they want to shake my hand, I'm like, absolutely, let's go. But if they don't, then I don't extend my hand. So what to wear? Different agencies have different policies. I personally suggest for your own personal safety and for the confidentiality of the person, not to wear your badge. It's awesome to have a badge. It's good to keep it in your pocket, to legitimize why is this random person here. Consider not wearing jewelry or things that can be grabbed. Today I'm wearing kind of dangly earrings. I don't wear earrings that are dangly in any way when I do home visits. I also don't wear my hair up in a ponytail, as I've had my ponytail grabbed when a consumer was trying to kind of control the situation. I try not to wear clothing with controversial messages unless they're pro people with disabilities, because that might be controversial, but that's core to our mission. This includes things like political, like I'm on this team, I'm on that team, and also sports teams. I've been to visits where somebody was wearing like a Bills shirt and the person absolutely rejected the worker because they just lost to that team the night before. So that just takes you off track and you're not working on your mission. Think about what you're going to be doing. I've done home visits where the whole purpose was to, you know, look at the safety of the place, and I knew I was going to be climbing on things or, you know, putting in detectors or different stuff. If you're going to be sitting on the floor, make sure you have clothes that you feel comfortable sitting on the floor. Try to avoid strong smelling products, like perfumes or even heavily scented laundry stuff. Sometimes people have sensitivities to it. It also can put a distance between you and this other person that you're wearing this like fancy perfume thing that costs more than their rent. It just sets up a divide. And then try to consider how to respect the culture of the house while still following your agency policy. So, complicated questions of when you're offered something to eat or drink, what can you say? For the last couple of years, we had some excuses because we were told you can't wear it, you have to wear your mask at all times. But now you have to decide for yourself. You also have to look at your policy, talk to your agency. Sometimes that can, you know, really be a way to connect with the person you're trying to help. I've eaten a lot of stale cookies in my day, but also sometimes that may not be safe, and depending on your own, you know, food allergies and things, that there might be a really deadly choice. Also, when to receive a gift, that's a really complicated one. So it's good to have a strong policy that you know instantly if somebody gives you, you know, this small tray that's probably worth $2, what can you say or not say? And then when to remove your shoes. So if you walk in and everyone has their shoes on, you should still ask, but it's likely that you don't have to take off your shoes. But if you walk in and there's a pile of shoes and no one else is wearing shoes, you're probably going to be encouraged to take off your shoes. We also bring shoe covers, which is nice. So they keep the, you know, mud, snow, rain off the person's floors, but also help keep the bugs and any creepy crawlies off your shoes.
We have a question in the Q&A for you, Alex. In regards for confidentiality, what about wearing an agency logo shirt? And then they also said we don't do home visits at our agency, but we do meet with individuals out in the community.
Yeah, so those are two really good questions, and it's really challenging. I think it depends on the situation as far as wearing a logoed item. If it's an item that anyone in the community can purchase, so like we have some, you know, ATI merch. I have a hat and jacket next to me. That's like an item that we give away the ball cap frequently. So that doesn't necessarily say, hey, I'm an ATI staff, but if it was something that was just for, you know, staff of your agency, then that would be a little trickier.
It depends, doesn't it, on the, situation and whether or not the situation is tricky. in some cases, hey, we're all about disability pride and we absolutely want to gather the disability community together to get things done. And, so we're proud of who we are and where we're from. But for some folks who are first approaching their disability and hadn't really maybe even admitted it to themselves yet. Uh-oh, did I go away?
No,
No, I got an hourglass up on my on my screen, but haven't even dealt with it themselves yet. They're still in that stage. It may be a very sensitive situation for them. So you just kind of have to judge, would they be comfortable with that? And if so, no problem. If they're actively engaged and willing to talk about being a part of the disability community with us, great. But not everybody is, especially in those early stages. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of balance it.
yeah, definitely awesome question. And all the stuff we're going to talk about is mostly going to be the same if you're meeting at the coffee shop, the park. I've done more visits on like random public places, like the waiting room of like a different office, the local coffee shop, on the like at a park when they don't trust you enough to let you know where they're living. So it's making sure you feel comfortable and that the person that you're meeting with is in charge of the visit as much as possible, because we believe that they know the best about their life. All right, any other questions? Oh, yeah, let's keep moving. Okay.
Sorry.
So, yeah, sorry. Let's see, we are on page 13 now for those following along at home. So when you approach a home, some tips that I do is check for the utility boxes. You have a sense of how many apartments might be in a building. A lot of times old farmhouses by us are split up into, 5 or 10 different small apartments. If the neighborhood is known to you, so maybe you've been there before for work or personal life, is it normally really busy and now it's quiet? Or normally it's like a country, quiet rural road and now it's like super busy, to get a sense of like when something might be off. When possible, like if you're driving to a visit, they suggest to park with your driver's side door away from the house, so you have something between the house and you, so you can like hide behind something. And scan the neighborhood for loose animals. When I approach, sometimes there's dogs barking, or like I've had like loose horses in like a rural place, and I've had horses kick my car. So like I'm gonna stay in the car, but I roll down my window and I say, "Hey, Bob, here for the visit. Do you mind, taking care of the animals, just so they're comfortable, because they don't really know me, and just wait." Sometimes I've had to wait 20 minutes for them to put up the horses or the dogs or whatever. So then we could actually have a good conversation without me being worried about being attacked or being distracted by that. Where it gets cold, look at the entrance in winter, about ice and snow. Have a plan of if the path is snow covered, do you still go? So that can be an agency policy, and how can you safely get up there?
And
Input on that?
one thing is also, what door are people using? Because a lot of farmhouses don't use that front door, right? They use the back door. And you can sometimes tell by how things are set up. But the first time you go to the wrong door, you kind of figure out, oh yeah, nobody uses this door because they can't figure out how to unlock it and so forth. You have a question, and that is, how long would you wait outside if someone's agreed to meet you at their home, but they're not answering their door?
That's an excellent question. I think it depends on what the purpose of your visit is. I've had times where I'm going out for a crisis, visit, where absolutely I'm gonna stay there for 15, 20 minutes. If they don't, come to the door. There's like probably on average, if they set up the visit, I'm gonna, knock, 10 to, 11 times. I might also call them if they have a phone. But yeah, so I would say it depends on, what the situation is. We've also done, we used to get referrals in my last job. When someone was struggling, someone else would refer somebody. So I would stay for like 2 to 3 minutes, because the person was not asking for our support. That's what I love about IL, is we put the person with a disability first. So I think it depends on the situation, but it's good to talk to your supervisor or other people that are doing home visits in your agency to get a sense of like, what is the normal?
While we're waiting for other questions, do you want to describe the pictures here?
I would love to. So yeah, so there's 2 pictures on your screen here. They're both of what I call power boxes. They might have a fancier name, but there's a meter that somebody comes and reads how much power you've used and then sends you a bill. So on the image on the left, there is 1 power box. So this probably indicates that there's 1 apartment in this building, although I've personally lived in apartment buildings where the heat was controlled by the downstairs neighbor. So it doesn't mean that there's no one else in the building, but it's an indication. And then the picture on the right, there are 4 power boxes in a row, and indicating there are going to be multiple units. This is obviously seen more by people that can see it without, getting too close. But it's something that can be helpful to kind of have a sense of what are you walking into, because sometimes neighbors can be helpful. If there's a situation, if you yell, somebody else might hear you. I've also had times where the situation was getting very tense, and then a neighbor then that was very comfortable walked in and made the situation more chaotic because they didn't realize what was actually happening. So it's just good to know, your surroundings and what's happening.
Other questions around approaching the house? You're planning for that, and the house, the apartment, the tent sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah, wherever
Yeah,
you're
that's
approaching the living setting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when I do homeless outreach, so seeing people that have a tent in the woods, I try to announce myself loudly. And if I do spot a tent, I try to stay, at least 10 to 20 feet back. So I'm not looming over them. I've only a couple times had to knock on a tent because my agency policy was to knock on the entrance to the dwelling, which is awkward. But normally I just say knock, knock, hello, this is Alex from such and such, just here to help, connect you to whatever.
Speaking of knocking on the door, we've had a few more notes.
I have a couple ideas about knocking. So yeah, so the purpose of knocking or communicating to them is you're trying to let them know that you're there. I try to make sure that I'm not intimidating and I'm also as safe as possible while I'm doing it. So when possible, I knock on the door and I take a few steps back and I turn sideways. I generally have my notebook in my hand. So you have something to defend yourself if someone does come out swinging, which in 20+ years of home visits never happened, but good to have. Also good for little kids or dogs that jump up, you can kind of push down and push them out of the way. And when you're sideways, you have less area for the person to hit, either to come out of the door and hit or to shoot through the door. So personally, I knock first, then ring the doorbell, just because most of our doorbells around us were installed 30 years ago and haven't worked for 20 years. So I knock, wait a few minutes, ring the doorbell, and then keep doing that a few times, and see what happens. If it's a really rural place, like I have people that were like, were on working farms. So I would try to talk to them ahead of time to say, well, if you're not at the house, do you want me to approach your barn? Or should I only go to the house? So it's really helpful when you get that chance to talk to the person before you go out, so you kind of know what to expect. Just so you're not wandering around somebody's farm. So they answered the door. You finally got a person that wants to talk to you. I always try to confirm that this is a good time and what they actually want to talk about. Because maybe they wanted to talk about, you know, these three things, but now their in-laws are over, or the kids invited some friends over, and now's not a good time to talk about their, you know, now they need help showering, or now they need help managing their money. And try to make a plan of where you're going to meet. You know, is it something where you have to fill out lots of paperwork? Is the kitchen better than the living room? Or do they have kids and they're running around crazy and it's better to go to the park across the street or to their backyard? I've multiple times gone to the house with the intention of having a home visit, and they say, oh, actually, I want to go to the library because they're doing something for the kids. Like, awesome. You drive, I'll follow, you know. But yeah, so that's that slide. Any other questions, Paula, or any comments?
I don't think so. Vicky, anything? All right, well, you all think about your questions. We're gonna watch a short video. I think you were gonna describe this for us.
Yes. So we have a quick visual description of the video. You can also find a visual description with the transcript of both of the videos shown under the materials section on the conference page for this session. But this YouTube video, Home Visiting Safety, Staying Safe and Aware on the Job, demonstrates what to do if you are threatened with harm. The video describes the actions that are occurring as they're being completed. So as you listen to the video or you're watching the ASL interpretation, the imagery on the video follows what is being said and explained.
Okay, let's watch this. I hope I got the captions on.
My name is Brenda Dolan. I've been a home visitor for 14 years.
I'm going to stop it and do the captions again. I must have clicked it the wrong number of times.
Being able to coach a parent and see the joy that they have, the light in their eyes.
Vicky, do you see on the bottom where it says?
Yeah, I'm clicking it, but it's not going.
They have made a difference in their child's life.
Let me try taking it all the way back. Oh, that's not working either.
One of the most rewarding things about being a home visitor is the relationship that you get to establish working with the families. But it can be very challenging because it's a dynamic environment. You never know what situation you will face walking up to that home and when you walk inside the door. Today I'm heading to visit Brian and Raquel, and they have recently moved. This will be my first time seeing them at their new home. Today's visit with Raquel and Brian was great, but thinking back, there were a number of things that I did to ensure my own personal safety. First, First, before the visit, I let my supervisor know who I was going to visit, where I was going, and when I planned to return. Second, because Raquel had moved and this was the first time I would be visiting her in her new home, I called ahead of time to gather important information that would keep me safe. I confirmed the address, asked her about where to park, and if there were any safety hazards in the neighborhood, like dangerous animals to watch out for. I also asked her who would be in the home during the visit. As I was arriving in my car, I took some time to drive around a bit and orient myself to the location. I always try to be aware of any people or groups of people that might be lingering around the home. In some cases, I've had to reschedule my visit if there were an unavoidable group of people between myself and the home I planned to visit. I was also looking for any no trespassing signs or any other indication of animals in the neighborhood. After doing my usual scan from the car, I decided it looked safe. I chose a parking spot on the street so I wouldn't be blocked in a driveway if I needed to leave quickly. I parked my car facing away from the home for that same reason and locked the doors, being sure to leave any valuables in the car and out of sight. I put my phone away so I could stay vigilant to my surroundings as I approached her door. Raquel's apartment was a good distance away from where I had to park. You never know who else is aware of your arrival and what their intentions are, so I always try to walk tall and confidently toward the home. Raquel's home was on the ground level, but when I visit families who live on the second floor of an apartment complex, I'm always cautious about entryways and stairwells. In this case, I told Raquel to be looking for me at the time of our scheduled visit. As I entered Raquel's home, there was a whole new set of safety challenges. My goal was to make a warm introduction and then make sure that I would be safe inside her home. After asking Raquel for permission to sit down, I chose to avoid any locations where I wouldn't be able to see what was going on behind me. When possible, I try to sit close to an exit so I could leave quickly if necessary. Once seated, I asked Raquel who else was in the home and if she expected anyone else to join us. ¿Y no estás expectando que alguien más viene? No. As I walked out the door, I took out my keys so that when I got to my car, I could easily unlock it. I began looking around to notice any people, activity, or animals, checking to see if the environment had changed while I was inside the home. Within a few minutes, I was at my car and on my way back to the office. Home visiting is an exciting, rewarding, but challenging job. It's important to remember we can't get our job done if we're not taking steps to actively keep ourselves safe in the field. I've learned from years of experience that we always have to be aware of our surroundings and trust our instincts. Know and follow your agency's safety policies. Enjoy the relationships you make along the way. But remember, ultimately, you're responsible for keeping yourself safe.
Well, I found out as I came into the home that there had been a shooting in that neighborhood. And I've been on a visit far away where I haven't charged my phone.
The abuser came to the house and came in and was loud and aggressive.
As I got out of my car, this man approaches me and he asks if I need help.
Baby's father's friends would go and drive around her driveway to see if she was home.
She was afraid that he was going to come in any minute. And I was afraid that he would get upset about her sharing the story with me.
And when I got to the home, boyfriend was there and several other friends of Mom were there. She would say, no, I feel comfortable in my apartment, but I wasn't really feeling comfortable.
Let people know where you're going to make sure that you have a cell phone on you.
Park on the side street so it's easy to get out.
Make sure that you look like you know where you're going, making sure that you're there when there are other people around.
Carrying yourself in a way that says I'm present and in the moment and I'm aware of my surroundings.
Having good, comfortable shoes on so that you can walk safely.
Generally, I try not to go to like a back bedroom or somewhere that is a little bit more isolated.
Making sure you know where exits are. If you sense danger, you can always repair later. You can always call the person.
Trust yourself and your own intuition. Listen to your body and say, okay, this isn't feeling right. And think about the next step you're gonna take.
If you're aware of what's going on, then you can stay safe.
My name is Gabby Cervantes.
My name is Jennifer Besterl.
I'm Danette Barkel.
Gabriela Maldonado Bell.
My name is Courtney Salzano, Bonnie Colborn.
My name is Jennifer Rux.
My name is Yesenia Lopez Green.
My name is Delphia Karaszewski, and I've been a home visitor for 25 years here in Yale Hill.
That's one of my favorite videos. It's a little old, but it's still, I think, relevant and walks you through exactly what she's doing.
I really like the part, Alex, where they talk about trusting your instincts. That's something that you can't always define or describe. But you know, some of the folks that we serve are very vulnerable, and they may have someone in their life who is abusive, and they may be reluctant to tell us that because they also depend on that person. So when that's the case, you know, you have to ask yourself, what am I sensing here? And you have to think about it. How can I help this person to be safe? How can I help them do what they need to do or tell what they need to tell or whatever? And also, how do I remove myself when I don't feel safe? But your gut tells you more than you might credit. So if you've got a feeling about something, listen to that.
Definitely.
Trying to get past that. Sorry.
He wants to replay. It's a good video, but we probably don't. need
Wants to
play it.
replay, but let's go to this one instead.
Sounds good.
So these were
Right.
some good points from the video itself, right?
Mhm. Exactly. So we're on slide 17 now, for those of you following along at home. So just like they mentioned in the video, try to be aware of the exit. I try not to sit with the exit behind me unless there's a reflective surface in front of me. Ask who's in the house. That's what they asked there. Mindful of the health hazards. I had a coworker at a different job that sat in front of a stove with boiling water on it. And when the person didn't like what they were hearing, they went to pour the boiling water on the staff person. In rural places, I know around us, there are usually many weapons hanging around. Some guns, some knives. So just knowing where the weapons are, and if they're in easy reach, that distance between you feeling comfortable and you get out of the house is much shorter when there are weapons close by. I try to sit on wooden or metal chairs because there's less bugs or animal fur on them. And if my body is able to, I'm not always able to stand for the whole home visit, but I'll say, you know, oh, I've been driving all day. I'd really like to stand. So I stand for the time that I'm meeting with them if it's a situation that I'm concerned about sitting. And just like the video says, if your gut says to leave, leave.
Let's talk just a minute about what you all see. Mary posted, be sure there's good lighting during the meeting, and that certainly is a good point. And the older my eyes get, the more I need the light if I'm going to read or write.
Exactly.
So there's also that. Sometimes you want to be close to a window if it's during the daytime. Of course, as the days get shorter, those, you know, the hours of available light begin to change, but it certainly is something to keep in mind, both so you can see what's going on and so you can see what you're doing as you go along. You know, I want to back up and say something here. We're not assuming that all consumers are putting you at risk when you go out to a home visit. What we're assuming is the world is hazardous, you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So we really want to make sure that when you're out and about in the world doing your work, that you're aware of that for not just those consumers who might have become more aggressive or who are struggling with things emotionally, but also with just the world around them, their abusers if they have them, the neighbors, the other folks in the world. So, but we heard from a lot of you that you have concerns about your safety when you're out and about. So what other things have you seen? Drop it in the chat or in the question Q&A. Q&A is good because we track whether or not we've answered your question, which is harder to do when we go back, scroll back through the chat. But drop your questions or your comments in there. We'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing? Is there anything specific that you're concerned about that you'd like to drop in there for us? Kendra says, have you done a meeting or visit in the schools and there is an active shooter? What do you recommend?
Unfortunately, so luckily I've never been in when there has been an active shooter. I've definitely been in schools when they're doing drills. And knowing, especially if it's a school you have an ongoing relationship with, knowing what that school's policy is, can be very helpful. And just try to follow whatever the teacher's suggestions are, or at that point.
Hopefully the students and the teachers have had a drill, even if you haven't. And so, you know, following the lead of the people around you, if anything goes, you know, goes wrong, whatever that is, it might be a fire, it might be an explosion in the chem lab, or you know, whatever it is that's an emergency. Hopefully they've drilled that and you can follow that, follow their lead in observing that. Sexually inappropriate talk or touch. Good question.
That's an excellent question. I had a client, I was doing home-based services, and he's very confused because he had some dementia, and why were these young women constantly around him? So he figured he should, you know, ask them to marry him, ask them to do very sexual things with him, about every 5 minutes. So I got really good at saying, no, I'm your staff. We met because I'm your staff, so nothing can ever happen. And trying to like bring it back around. This is why I'm not saying you're a horrible person or you're ugly or you're whatever. I'm your staff. That's the only relationship we can have. But yeah, it's one reason why I left one job was someone trying to touch me sexually, and I was like, okay, I'm done. If there's not agency policy to help back you up, then you have to decide how to keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
And then talking to coworkers, getting yourself support would be my suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary said one time I had a lady tell me to park in her garage. I had only spoken with her on the phone, so was not comfortable parking in the garage. Maybe I watched too much Dateline. Well, you know, maybe we should and just know worst case scenario, but you don't want to be in the worst case scenario, Mary. That's right. So I parked in the driveway and walked in through the garage instead, and she was only being kind, but it made me nervous, so I was unwilling to do it. And that's fine. If you're nervous and unwilling to do it, that's fine. If you have somebody that you're working with regularly who makes sexually inappropriate comments, you have several choices. You know, one is to always keep a distance and a barrier between you. And as they move, you keep moving to face them, so you never turn your back to them. And it's a little bit of a dance sometimes because they're reaching around to pat you on the bottom or whatever it is they're grabbing. And it's, like I said, a little bit of a dance, but you can do that. I walk with a cane most of the time, and I've put my cane up between me and the other person, you know, just to say, hey, no, that's close enough. You always have to explain, if you always have to explain that's too much. But if you just consistently say no and keep your, keep your balanced distance, if that's successful, you want to do that. Another choice is to talk to your supervisor about assigning someone else. It could be that you have a very specific quality that this person is attracted by, and someone else would be treated differently. So it's worth exploring that with the person. It is certainly something that at some point you may want to have a goal with that person about how to react or interact or how this ought to look.
Yeah, definitely. That's in taking referrals. It's great to ask those questions of who do they get along with most? Is it easier for them to hear advice from someone that's older than them? Or,
Right.
a white woman remind them of this bad person that did something to them. Okay, well, we're gonna try to get somebody else.
Right, exactly.
Just trying to
Yeah.
match.
And Lisa said it's hard as an executive director. It's really a difficult thing to do, but sometimes you send two people. And you may not do it all the time. You may only do it as you're figuring things out. Because it isn't, as far as funding is concerned, it isn't easy to pay for that, but it always gives you a witness in the situation. And so if you need a witness in that situation where there's no room for accusations of inappropriate touching, goes both ways too. If you've got a staff member who's accused
Mhm.
of making a sexual advance, then you want to have a witness to make sure that that's not the situation. Yeah, that's certainly another choice that you can make at your center that supports the staff and at the same time, helps you to begin to analyze the situation with the consumer and help them to see that this behavior is problematic and what can they do if it's something within their control. Is it something that helps to talk about or not? But you can start that process. Tri-County Independent Living does that as well. We only let clients in the office when there are two staff in the office. So also in the office, and with hybrid situations, remembering that you always want at least two people in the office is an important part of that for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, in past jobs, we always had a policy of, if it was a cold, outreach that somebody referred somebody, we always send two people. And especially if you have staff that have two clients that are relatively close in proximity and you have to drive an hour to get there, sending them both together can
Good sense
actually
anyway.
save time. Because then at least one of them can be on the phone to other clients while they're driving. So there's ways to make it productive and also make it safe.
Yeah, and they may even bond over the, where they stop for a cold drink on the way, right? I really
Exactly.
love this little coffee shop down here. It's really great, or whatever.
And where are the friendly bathrooms? That's something we do.
Oh yeah, the friendly bathrooms, even more important.
Bathrooms, like a coffee shop that will let you pee, or a gas station that has a microwave. Especially during COVID, when no one was letting you inside, you couldn't pee and you couldn't heat up any food. So I would take my frozen meal and put it on the windshield to have it thaw over the 4 hours. So maybe it was unfrozen enough for me to eat. So trying to think about those things are definitely
Oh yeah, the exercises that COVID brought to us, huh?
definitely.
We probably need to move ahead, but those were.
Yeah, we have a couple of slides left that are
Yeah.
relatively important.
So we talked about making a shared vision with the individual or the family and the worker on what the goals are for the visit. And that's certainly important. It also reduces anxiety, and often anxiety is at the basis of some of the lashing out that we see from consumers. So anything you can do to help to reduce the anxiety is going to be helpful for that person for sure. And
when things go sideways, this is one of my favorite terms. I'm not sure if this is the correct term, but it's the most politically correct term without swearing that I can think of. So try to stay calm. If you need to leave, make an excuse and leave. Like I've suddenly in the middle of a conversation when things start to get really, really tense and I don't feel comfortable said, oh, you know what? This is so important. I'm going to go right back to the office now and talk to my supervisor and blah, blah, blah. Or I have to attend this meeting, or, oh, I really have to call my supervisor every 30 minutes. They're cracking down on us. Whatever excuse you have to make, get out. If you can't leave, they're blocking you from leaving. Call 911 and try to get to a safe space. So ask to use the bathroom and call for help. I've also gone to a safe place, asked to use the bathroom and called the supervisor and said, what do I do? Or now texting is wonderful. You can text someone and say, this is my situation. Can you call me in 2 minutes and tell me I need to get back, or whatever you have to do to feel comfortable.
And sometimes you can come up with a short phrase for that so that you can just glance down and hit 2 keys and they know to call you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so a lot of times that helps. Kathy said she had a man that chased her out of his house and yelled at her to the point she was afraid he was going to go get his gun.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've
You get
been
out of
told
there.
to get the bleep, bleep, bleep off somebody's property. If they breathe enough for me to say, sure, that's fine. Can I call you in a few days? Sometimes people say yes, like they chase you off the property, but then they're fine if you talk to them later. But yeah, but definitely like if you feel uncomfortable, get out of there. Have some calming exercises ready to go. I have some in my back pocket. Just, you might have seen me when Paula's talking or even when I'm talking and I'm like, okay, I'm deeply breathing, or I have a hair tie and I'm fidgeting with it.
I twiddle my thumbs. I shouldn't, but I do.
Just whatever you have to do, because keeping yourself calm is going to help that other person to stay calm. I also have the crisis text line on my phone saved. Either when I leave the situation and let's say I try to call my supervisor, they're busy. I try to talk to my favorite coworker, they're busy. There's somebody you can talk to about the situation. You still don't, tell people their name. Chased by a bull, that's a new one. I've not been chased by a bull. I've not lived yet, apparently.
Vicki, that is a great one. I've been chased by a goose, but not a bull.
Gooses are rough. That's true. So yeah, so sometimes I've called the crisis line when I need to talk. I don't tell the client's information, but I can talk about the situation with someone I'm never going to see again in my life. Or if the person's in crisis, especially if I have a work phone, I call the number with the person's permission, hand them the work phone, and then I use my phone to start calling for support for myself, calling to try to figure out what are we going to do. And if you have an employee assistance program or EAP, it's there. Your agency is literally paying to have it. We don't have it because we're so small and it costs so much money. But there's awesome supports. Paula found like Healthiest You.
Yeah, and we've got some of these links at the end of the presentation. We're going to move a little bit. We've got a list of policies here to make sure that you look at important, phone numbers and some other things on some of the slides, which are available in a number of different formats. But we're going to move to a part of this that we feel is really important. And I'm going to start with this presentation on Run, Hide, Fight, and then we're going to go to discussion of the Stress for All You, which I think is really important too. So let's
and
set
Paula,
this
let me give you the visual description before you start the video.
Yes.
So this video demonstrates what to do in an active shooter situation if you're threatened with harm. So this is a fast changing scene video, and the actions coincide with the spoken instructions. The only thing on the screen that is not spoken are that the words run, hide, fight show up on the screen.
Thank you. Here we go.
In an active shooter situation, your survival may depend on having a plan. There are 3 choices to consider: run, hide, or fight. there's an escape path, evacuate at once.
Ah,
You pause for a second.
I know, I see that. There it goes.
Belongings behind. Help if possible, but keep moving and warn others to leave the area. If hiding is your best option, find the most secure place you can, lock or block the door. Silence your cell phone and remain very quiet. As a last resort, and only if your life is in danger, attempt to incapacitate the shooter. If possible, improvise a weapon and then act with physical aggression. If you choose to fight, it's vital that you commit to this course of action. Your survival will be at stake. Run, hide, or fight. Consider your options and make a plan.
So that's a good summary for you about some of the potential actions that you can take a look at. We've already talked a little about your your stresses and some of the things to do with your anxieties. So we're going to skip a couple of slides. Like I said, they're available in alternate formats for you at the site for this presentation. We've mostly been looking at staff situations. Some of these same things really do apply to consumer situations. So, look at the consumer and ask yourself, should we do some training with the consumer on how they can stay safe? Because they may have a parade of people through their home. My mom lives with us and she has caregivers, sometimes 4 or 5 a day, it seems like. No, she has 2 a day, but not every day is the same. But when you have a parade of people through your house, what are your choices around saying to people, I don't want you here? And if you're vulnerable, who can you call if someone is behaving in a way that they really shouldn't? So that's a good, question for you to take a look at. Using the same skills to scan and look for potential problems, helping consumers to have those skills for their own safety is a very reasonable independent living skill to look at and to take time to ask. If I live in an unsafe environment, and unfortunately many of the people that we serve have very low incomes and may live in marginal safety situations, and even if they don't live in marginal neighborhoods, they still may, they live in the world, and this is a world that has a lot of aggression. So they may still need to think about how they can protect themselves, and we can help them with that as a life skill to learn if we look at that. Also, if they're angry or upset, we can help them with learning skills to feel good about that. On the staff side, we can practice active listening, really carefully hearing what the person is trying to say, and finding common ground with them. If the person is from a different culture or uses another language, you really do need to communicate clearly, and you may need an interpreter. And that's not just for your deaf consumers, it may be for consumers who speak another language as well. You want to make sure that that language isn't a barrier. And sometimes we think, oh yeah, I understand well enough. Well, you may not. If it's complex and if it has to do with violence or anxiety or both, really listening and understanding is important. What's the real focus of the anger? Keep your distance between you and the problem, and establish control with facts, their facts. You don't have to correct what they believe, but you have to acknowledge it. So take a look at that and assist the person with coming up with a plan for themselves. for the next steps to deal with whatever it is that's causing the anger and the sometimes acting out related to that anger. Is your anxiety contributing to that? Be very calm, but don't be patronizing. Because if you're calm and say, oh, they're there, that is not helpful, right? Because that doesn't take the time to do what you wanted to do. And I rushed those slides because I wanted to get to this one. And that is, what do you do when you think the person might be suicidal? And I don't know if Vicki wants to jump in on part of this too, or Alex, if you want to take the lead, but this is important because I don't know if all of us have had that experience, but I would say most of us have had the experience of a consumer or a staff member committing suicide. So let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah, so this is Alex here. I can mention, and we didn't put it in the slide deck, that many people struggle with mental health. I'm one of those people. I'm in a good spot right now. But that having this conversation does not mean you think less of the person. It actually means that you like care about them and want to make sure that they're here tomorrow. So I've had this conversation with my grandma, with my best friend, probably saved my best friend's life. So asking directly, are you thinking about killing yourself? We think that we can like put the idea in their head, but we really can't. It's just like me saying, hey, Paula, do you mind flying across the country to do my dishes and mow my lawn? Like that's not gonna make you do that because you're not gonna do that. So just asking the question. There's a great tool called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, and they just put it in the chat, which is awesome. It literally is the questions of what to say. I've used this to train police officers, first responders, whoever, and it tells you exactly what to do. If people say yes to this question, what do you do? And it's a free scale, which is awesome. Suicidal thoughts are actually relatively common. And are sometimes a response to a new disability. I used to manage a mobile crisis team, and about a third of our calls over 2 years were about people that had a recent onset of a disability, and they could not imagine being a person that had to deal with whatever, had to deal with a mobility tool, or the people are going to judge them or whatever. And that's the horrible ableism of our society, that we have an internal crisis because we know that it's going to be harder because we haven't worked to make the society more inclusive when we weren't a person with a disability. That's why our whole IL movement is critical.
Yeah.
Address the stigma that, you know, that they may not want certain people to know, and that's okay. Talk to them, don't leave the person alone. And try to bring in people that you know are supportive to say, oh, hey, you know, is Aunt so-and-so still a good, you know, support to you right now? And then bring them in. One easy thing that we have is no-cost gun locks. We got them from our local police department. And we just have them available because with the different gun laws and things, I don't have like permission or a permit to be able to like have a handgun or have long guns or whatever, but I can, with the person's permission, put a gun lock through their gun and take the key or put the key with somebody that they trust. Because for most people, time and means restriction is going to allow the suicidal thinking to pass so they can start to get help.
And Jamie mentioned her biggest suggestion is don't minimize the emotions that the person is feeling here. Yeah.
Yes.
And as you said, Alex, so much of the thinking regarding that onset of disability flows from, you know, popular culture who says, well, my life's over then. You know, if I have a disability, there's nothing else left for me. And unfortunately, that message finds its way into all kinds of things, songs and movies and TV shows, and people who have not experienced disability haven't really thought about it. They just have absorbed that without knowing it. And when they face that disability, they think, oh, that's my only solution. some think that.
Yeah.
So it really is important to be able to respond to that. I think it's also important for staff, and I don't want to minimize this because I have had staff who committed suicide and I didn't see it coming at all. And sometimes that's the case. You don't see it coming. But if you want to look at, what's happening, I also need to admit that I have trouble changing my language around this issue because it's so ingrained that commit suicide, but really that's not the best way to say it. And Alex, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, but.
Sure, yeah, so that's part of the stigma stuff. There's a lot of free trainings in this area. So like the Mental Health Association or American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they talk more about stigma. So we commit crimes, we commit sins. So we can say they died by suicide. So it's just like putting the person first. We're trying to highlight the person that lost their life to suicide. Yeah, it's just a little thing.
Committing is very stigmatizing, and I really do need to correct my thinking there. So
it's a process.
That's an important piece. Just a quick problem with law enforcement, and you see it in the news. I've seen it in life, where somebody calls 911, but the team responding doesn't get all the information. And I know of two situations where a family member called and explained he's not thinking straight, but he really isn't going to hurt anybody. He has a stick in his hand, but he always carries that stick for reassurance. And he really isn't threatening you. It's not a weapon. So we really need to just be aware of that. And he was still shot and killed by law enforcement. And two different situations, but similar setting where the message to the 911 operator may have even been communicated, may not have been communicated, but law enforcement is very much conditioned to respond to violence in a certain way. And so it really is, if the person is violent, better to look at a community crisis team first, if you have one. If you don't have one, that may be an advocacy area for your center to consider. We just have a few more minutes, so other comments or questions? Well, one of the attendees said, consider thinking about our consumers who are Black and brown before calling the police. And absolutely that is the case. And actually, in both these cases, it was a family member who made the call, but both these cases were Black consumers.
Yeah. It's absolutely critical. I try to withhold calling police if at all possible. We also locally train our police and meet with them once a month. So has anyone used or had experience with 988? So 988, for those of you who don't know, is the new crisis line instead of the super long 1877 talk, whatever, that I always told people the wrong number. It goes to the same centers that were doing it before. A lot of us are doing a lot of advocacy around it because they changed the number. But they decided that even though it costs money to do that and tell people, they're maybe not going to put the money in. So talk with your agencies about potential advocacy around that. Our problem locally is our mobile crisis team is answered by one suicide crisis center, but our 988 goes to another one. So then there's more time delayed in getting the right call to the right person to dispatch the team.
Yeah. So test it out locally, find out what you need to know at a local level, because it's, of course, local response. And Alex mentioned training for, for law enforcement. around disability, and that would also apply here. But I didn't see anybody jumping in, Jamie, to say, yes, they have experience on that. So
So,
if you do,
hi
jump
guys,
in.
this is Arius. You have a 5-minute warning.
Okay,
And then
thank
we
you,
did-
Arias.
We did have a participant with, or an attendee with their hand raised, but I don't know if they lowered it. We'll just wait for them to raise it again if not.
Okay, and I can't see all the participants in the view I've got with the screen, so.
Yes, we apologize if we missed you. We don't want to ignore you. Yeah, Paul is 100% accurate that call your local resources, call 211 and ask for your program, but don't use the right term and see if they find you. Talk to the local police and say, if you find someone that uses sign language, do you have any idea what you're gonna do? You can have the conversation before it's a crisis.
Any other questions or comments? We did have some additional resources listed for you, and that's also provided for you on the page for this training. And there is an evaluation on the website for you to take a look at. We also have our own ILRU evaluation, but you can just do one of the, just do the April one, it's fine. So I'm not going to go to that now. Last slide.
Nice. And this is a really heavy topic, so I just want to acknowledge that. So I know for myself, I'm going to probably listen to a fun piece of music for a few minutes before I have to go to my next meeting. So just try to take care of yourself and take care of each other, because you guys are awesome and the IL movement needs every single one of you. So eventually we won't have to talk about, ableism or accessibility, because just everything will be accessible.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think
Paula,
we're done.
Paula, if you would like, I can share the link for the ILRU survey on the same page where all the resources are, and so people can fill that out if they have time. So
That
you
would
can
be
also
very
look at that.
nice. Thank you
Okay.
for doing that. We get our funding from ACL and they ask us all the time what our evaluation data shows, so it
Yeah.
helps.
Absolutely. I will add a really easy to click link. So if you all, maybe during your break, if you want to fill that out
Thanks.
for Paula and Alex, that would be really great.
Thank you. Send good thoughts to Vicky. She had a rough day. Every time she tried to talk, they kicked her out. Her own system wasn't working well, so. Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.